I never thought I'd end up as a lighthouse keeper. Growing up in the bustling heart of the city, the silence of the sea always seemed like an alien concept to me. But after my life took a downward spiral of breakup, job loss, and a mounting pile of debts, I found myself responding to a cryptic ad in the classic feeds. Lighthouse keeper wanted. Solitary work. Good pay. Remote location. Some rules apply. The interview was brief, conducted over the phone. The man on the other end, who introduced himself as Mr. Hawthorne, barely asked about my qualifications. Instead, he inquired about my tolerance for solitude and my ability to follow instructions to the letter. Within days, I was on a ferry headed to Blackwater Rock, a desolate island with a single towering lighthouse at its peak. The place was as bleak as it sounded. The air was heavy with the briny scent of salt, the rocks slick with algae. Waves crashed endlessly against the jagged shoreline, their rhythm both soothing and ominous. The lighthouse itself loomed above me, its white facade streaked with age and weather. Mr. Hawthorne greeted me at the dock, a gaunt man with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you. "You'll be fine as long as you stick to the rules," he said, handing me a yellowed sheet of paper. "Read them carefully, and don't break them." The list was an unnervingly specific one. Keep the light on from dusk till dawn. Never let it go out. If the light fails, they will come. 2. Do not open the door to anyone after dark, no matter what you hear. They will try to deceive you. 3. If you hear 3 knocks, do not respond. It's not a visitor. 4. Keep the mirror in the keeper's quarters covered at all times. Reflections can be dangerous. 5. Never leave the lighthouse between sunset and sunrise. You won't find your way back. I chalked it up to old superstitions. Every profession had its quirks, I reasoned. Besides, the pay was decent, and I needed the isolation to sort my life out. The first night was uneventful. I went through the motions, lighting the massive Fresnel lens, checking the mechanisms, and pacing the cramped quarters. The wind howled outside, but inside, the lighthouse felt solid, impenetrable. I fell asleep to the steady hum of the machinery. It was the second night when things started to feel off. As I climbed the spiral staircase to the lamp room, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. Dismissing it as my imagination, I focused on my tasks. But just as I was about to descend, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting shadow darting across the edge of the light's reach. When I turned, there was nothing but darkness. Back in my quarters, I couldn't shake the unease. The mirror hung on the wall, draped with a thick cloth. I stared at it for a moment, tempted to pull it aside. What could possibly happen? But the memory of Mr. Hawthorne's stern warning stopped me. Instead, I turned in for the night, the list of rules tucked under my pillow. The knocks began on the 3rd night. I was reading by lamplight when I heard them 3 sharp raps at the heavy oak door. My heart skipped a beat. No one was supposed to be here. The island was isolated, and the ferry only came once a week. I froze, the book slipping from my hands. The knocks came again, louder this time. I crept to the door, my breath shallow. "Who's there?" I called, immediately regretting it. Silence. The rules flashed through my mind. Do not open the door to anyone after dark. If you hear 3 knocks, do not respond. I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears. The knocks didn't come again. But I didn't sleep that night. The following days blurred together, each more unsettling than the last. Shadows danced on the periphery of my vision, whispers seemed to echo in the stairwell, and the air grew colder, despite the summer season. One morning I found the cloth covering the mirror had slipped, revealing a sliver of reflective glass. My reflection stared back, pale and gaunt, but as I reached to fix it, I thought I saw movement behind me, a fleeting figure in the corner of the room. When I turned, nothing was there. By the 4th day, the isolation and unease began taking their toll. The nights stretched endlessly, filled with sounds that made my skin crawl, scratching, faint tapping, and once, a mournful wail carried on the wind. During the day, I worked tirelessly to maintain the lighthouse, trying to ignore the oppressive sense of being watched. The list of rules haunted me, each line etched into my mind. Why did I have to keep the mirror covered? Who or what was knocking at the door? I felt as if I were teetering on the edge of a dark revelation, one I wasn't sure I wanted to face. On the 4th night, the whispers became louder. They seemed to rise from the very rocks outside, weaving through the walls of the lighthouse. The words were indistinct, yet I could sense emotion behind them, pleading, anger, despair. It was maddening, and I found myself gripping the rusted wrench that I now carried with me everywhere. The knocks returned, relentless and rhythmic. 3. Pause. 3. Pause. The door rattled in its frame, the sound reverberating through the small space. I sat in the corner of my quarters, trembling, staring at the covered mirror. My mind screamed at me to uncover it, to face whatever truth it held, but I couldn't. The memory of Mr. Hawthorne's grave expression when he handed me the rules stopped me. Still, the temptation gnawed at me, stronger with each passing moment. On the 5th night, everything came to a head. The knocks were accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. The whispers had turned into full-fledged voices, speaking in a language I couldn't comprehend. The light in the lamp room faltered, its steady beam flickering like a dying heartbeat. Panic set in. I raced up the spiral staircase, my wrench in hand, to find the lens struggling to rotate. The air was icy, and I could see my breath clouding in front of me. That's when I saw the figure. It stood just outside the light's reach, tall and impossibly thin. Its limbs seemed to stretch unnaturally, and its face was a blur of shadow and void. As the light swept past, it vanished, only to reappear closer when the beam returned. My heart pounded as I fought to keep the light steady. I didn't know what would happen if it went out, but I wasn't willing to find out. Back in my quarters, I found the mirror uncovered. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't my face. The features were twisted, warped with fear and malice. The reflection moved, though I did not, leaning closer to the glass. Then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here," it said, its voice an echo of the whispers I'd been hearing all along. The lamp room door slammed shut, and the lighthouse shook as if struck by a massive wave. I scrambled to the top, where the figure now stood beside the lens. Its void-like eyes locked onto mine, and its mouth opened into an unnaturally wide grin. "You broke the rules," it hissed, the words crawling under my skin. I don't remember much of what happened next. I swung the wrench, but the figure dissolved into shadow, its scream echoing in the confined space. The light steadied, and the temperature returned to normal. By the time dawn broke, I was sitting in the lamp room, trembling, staring at the horizon. The ferry arrived later that day, and I left without a word. Mr. Hawthorne never contacted me again. The nightmares lingered for months, but eventually, they faded, though the feeling of being watched never truly left. Sometimes late at night, I hear 3 knocks at my door, and I remember the rules I should never have broken. Even now, safe in my apartment, I know Blackwater Rock hasn't let me go. The lighthouse's pull remains a shadow in my life. Occasionally, I catch glimpses of it in my dreams, the narrow staircases, the cold air, and the echoing voices. The figure's grin haunts me in every mirror, a reminder that I'll never truly be free. I've started to notice a strange chill in my apartment, a cold spot that wasn't there before. And though I've convinced myself it's nothing, sometimes when the wind howls just right, it sounds like a mournful whisper, calling me back to Blackwater Rock.